including the last, Councillor Hobson, who I felt did an excellent job of running the last meeting, which is not easy to do when you have what feels like literally hundreds of people waving pitchforks at you. That was a very difficult meeting, and well done, Councillor Hobson, for how that was chaired. I also have an apology about the agenda for tonight's meeting, because we were expecting to have a presentation from Natural England, which was tagged on to a later version of the agenda. Unfortunately, they contacted us only yesterday to say they couldn't attend the meeting. So what we'll do when we get to the last but one item before the work programme, if the committee's happy, is I'd like to consider questions that we could ask them and provide to them, so that then they can come to a future meeting and answer those questions and answer any corollary questions. So hopefully, if members are happy that we do that, we'll proceed on that front. So item 1 on the agenda is decisions and actions. Has anybody got anything to say in relation to any of those? Or can we agree that they've all been dealt with? Everyone, is the committee happy with that? Okay. Item 2, apologies for absence.
Received apologies from Councillor Gale, Councillor Pringle.
Okay, are there any substitutions?
We do. We have Councillor Taylor substituting for Councillor Gale.
Okay, thank you. Declarations of interest. Does any member of the committee have a declaration of interest? Item 4, public participation.
We do have somebody viewing online, just admitting them now.
Have they registered to speak?
No participation.
Okay. Item 5, consideration of any matter referred to the committee in relation to calling. There being none. Item 6, financial performance report. Can I hand over to Fiona?
Yeah, I'll take that, Chair. Thank you. So thank you, Chair. This report really is presenting the forecast financial position for the Council as at the end of September, so the Q2 position. The report has a particular emphasis on those services that fall within the remit of this committee, but we also provide an overview of the overall general fund position for the Council as well. So for the general fund revenue, we're reporting an overall surplus for the year, or forecast surplus of 645k. And of that, there's a pressure for services that fall within the remit of this committee of around 885k. Now, in terms of the overall surplus for the general fund, what's driving that is the same explanation has been given, I think, to this committee many times, which is the performance of the Council's investment income. So we have a strong level of cash balances, which we are able to invest on behalf of the Council, and we continue to see a strong return on the investment of those cash balances. That benefit is expected to continue for this financial year, but we obviously cannot guarantee that going forward. That will be an ongoing benefit to the authority. In terms of the capital programme for schemes relating to this committee, broadly these are on budget, and we're experiencing slippage on those schemes of around 630k. Now, the majority of that relates to our verge hardening programme, and then there are some other areas of slippage as well. Lots of detail in the report, and I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you. Questions? Sure, this is going to be a very short meeting.
Okay, let me ask a question.
Yes, please.
In regards to the reserves, do you is it, when you say cash, is it all cash orientated? Is it all sort of like banks, or is it fixed rates with gilts, or is it?
So in terms of the investment of our cash balances, the Council has a treasury management strategy that's approved by members.
Yeah.
We place that cash in various investment products. It's largely other banks and building societies and so on based in the UK. That's broadly it, but we do have the scope to invest elsewhere.
Right, because I'm just thinking Bank of England meeting tomorrow. I'm guessing they're probably going to drop interest rates by 0.5%. And if we were able to lock that away, you could still probably get a decent fixed rate for a year. But are we allowed to lock reserves away for that period of time with limited access?
So the council tends to invest its balances for up to a year. So that's generally within the scope of our gift to do that. We don't tend to invest longer than that. Largely for purposes of liquidity. We want to be able to access that cash if we need to for our cash flow management. But there is a scope to invest for up to
The good news is it could continue. The additional growth could continue for at least another 12 months.
That's
with
correct.
luck. Thank you.
Any other questions? Is the committee happy to note the report?
Yes.
Yes. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Item 7. Q2 performance report, neighbourhood services. Who would like to hand over to Stefania?
Thank you, Chair. So the report presents a number of indicators that we do monitor regularly through this committee. As you can see, the indicators are primarily green with some ambers and one red. The narrative is quite self-explanatory in terms of why we are where we are. I think the red shouldn't really be taken as bad news. I think the team is doing a tremendous job in make sure that the graffiti are actually cleared on time as per the KPI. They were just it's just contextual in relation to where these graffitis were. So and the fact that they were just too high and they needed to organise the scaffolding, so we just missed the target for that particular reason. But otherwise, I think the team is performing very well. And as you can see, there was a band of green before that actually shows that they're doing well. So it's not of a concern in my view. There are also other ambers that are again, some of them are something that we will improve in relation to, for example, systems and procedures that will make us better, and particularly around the fly tipping element of it. We're working very closely with transformation team to make sure that we get more effective there, and that will reduce the paper-based exercise that potentially let us respond to interventions a little bit later. But overall, it's not really a matter of having an issue with the team, and the performance is more about how we're doing things and how we perform and how we can improve. So, yes, and then the rest is self-explanatory. So I can ask, before I go into the next side of the report, I wonder if there are any questions on the performance indicators.
All right. Councillor Timmis?
Before I ask my question, I just want to say that from my personal point of view, the waste, I'm not sure what you call them now, but waste operatives, the guys that come and collect the rubbish, are brilliant. They are very, very nice and chatty and everything else, and I want to say that is brilliant. And my question is, I have two actually. One is when you quote the, hold on, let me just find it, number, percentage of fly tips collected within the set timescale, and a bit further down there's percentage of environmental health, percentage of fly tips reported. We're getting a percentage, but we don't have the overall number of fly tips. So I would like to be able to know what the overall number is, because 75% or whatever may be very good if there are 100, but if there's 500, 75% may not look so good. So
we can put that in the narrative perhaps for the next report.
I've got that data. So in Q2 there's 400 for fly tipping. There was 474 reports and 446 were removed within the requisite 7 days. And then for graffiti there was 31 reports and 25 were removed within the requisite 7 days.
Yes, I'm most concerned about fly tips, because I do find that in my area in particular there are a lot. And you do a good job at picking them up, but nonetheless we don't seem to manage to actually prevent them happening as much as I'd like to. Then my other question is about garages rented. You mentioned again it's a percentage. Let me just find that, here we are. As again, 76% out of 77%. So what about the other 30%?
So there is a strategic asset review at the moment in relation to the stock of garages, also in relation to the wider strategic asset reviews for the wider assets of the council. So garages are part of that strategic asset review.
Sorry, you talk.
Sorry.
I can't just hear what you're saying, sorry.
Okay, so the council is organising a strategic asset review for all the assets to make sure that, like you're quite right, saying, you know, we need to understand the stock and what we've got and maximise opportunities for our stock. So the garages are included in that review. So we're doing a review at the moment to understand really the status of our stock and the opportunities for that stock and what we're doing with that. There are certain elements of the garages that are not usable at the moment. And the question is, what do we want to do with that? Whether we want to put them back in use or whether we want to do something different.
A lot of these garages are now too small for the average cars, and probably not used for cars. And certainly, if you look around Markyate village that I live in,
I mean, we're about to start work on a new business plan for garages, but part of that is looking at, you're right in that your standard modern car won't go in a garage. So it's about how we pitch the service in terms of storage and things like that for people. So
or not being used at all, or whatever, over a period of time. But certainly in the village I live in, people are not prepared to drive around to a garage because it's not part of the house or next to the house. So everybody is parking on the verge or in the road.
But to put that figure in context, we've got 7,093 garages.
That's good. You've got a
Of
number
which 5,455 are currently occupied. So that's how we get to our 76% or just under 77% figure.
Very interesting would be to be able to determine what proportion of that is being used to store a car or a vehicle. One idea I remember many years ago, a colleague coming up with was suggesting that if we just demolished them, we could actually increase the number being used for parking cars dramatically overnight and save ourselves the cost of maintaining them.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's for the strategic asset review to pick up on, obviously. Any further? Councillor Deacon by a short hand, followed by Councillor Patterson.
Firstly, I want to congratulate on the car parks getting the park mark, and it's the first time I've heard of it because I'm still new and I'll be using that excuse for another year or so. But what I just wanted to point out about Durham's Hill car park, I don't think as many people use that as they should, because my residents tell me they don't feel particularly safe because there isn't I think the bridge near Durham's Hill car park changed, and the footpath is the other side of the road. So I think they don't feel particularly safe crossing it, but also I don't think they feel particularly safe leaving their cars overnight because there's no public walking past the car park. So it did, when I read that it was awarded due to criteria such as reducing crime and improving safety for people and their vehicles, I thought I'd, at the very least, just point that out to you. And there may not be anything we could do.
It is subject. It's externally awarded. So, but yeah, I can pick that up with Dan when he's back. So,
well, it might be safe because not many people are using it. I don't.
Councillor Patterson.
Yes, I just got a bit of. I'm happy with nearly everything except the drop in the percentage of graffiti removed within 7 days, going from 94.74 to 80, which is a big drop. Obviously, nowhere near the target. But I suppose that does depend on how much graffiti you have to remove.
yeah, so we had 31 reports and achieved 25, which is slightly, I suppose, that's what gave the figures. So of those 6 that were missed, 2 were on 2-storey buildings, so we had to get a scaffold tower in to do that, and 4 of us required ownership checks to determine responsibility. I want to do a bit of work with the team because in some ways, it feels like we're shooting ourselves in the foot a little bit here by reporting an 80% figure, whereas those 6, you could argue, are outside our control. So
Yeah, perhaps it would be annotated to explain exactly what the problems are, because you are shooting yourself in the foot. You don't explain why it's gone so low. I understand it now.
Is this all graffiti or?
yes,
So, because my understanding was obscene or
Should go
for
with
want
it.
of a better term, nasty stuff gets done immediately.
yeah, 24 hours. Yeah.
24 hours, yeah.
Yes.
Councillor Bromham, I'll invite you as a cabinet member to.
Just to respond to Brian, really, I had mentioned before that I think that performance is pretty good, and so the fact it's amber or whatever, I wouldn't want the officers to be disheartened by that. And you compare that to what the county council does, which doesn't seem to have any comparable targets, and I've complained about graffiti, which has been there for months and months, which they haven't. They say it's not. They don't even intend to action it.
Yeah.
Any other questions? No? Can we note the report?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you very much. Item 8, planning development and regeneration. Over to you, Phil.
Yep, good evening, everyone. The performance figures in the appendix on the last page of the report have 2 sections. The second half, place and enterprise performance summary. I won't be able to answer any questions on that area because unfortunately that's not my area. So I did, though, in terms of the number of business engagements, which is the only red measure in the report, I have been informed that that typically is quite low during the summer period. Businesses are away, just as council staff members are away, but they do expect that to pick up in the months to come. In terms of the planning performance summary, we can see that both measures are green. In terms of planning applications, as a total, 81% determined within target, and I can answer questions should members wish on topics such as extensions of time and what projects we're doing at the moment. In terms of planning enforcement, I think this has been a huge success of the team. There has been additional resources put into that team over the last 12 months, and that has really borne fruit. We're now achieving 100% of all enforcement cases that we receive. 100% of them across all 3 priority levels are being visited in time. So that's within 1 working day for priority 1s, within 10 working days for priority 2s, and within 15 working days for priority 3s. And that compares to where we were, as per 1.8 in the report in Q3 of last year, we're down at 32%. And there has been an increase each quarter. It's now where we've returned to 100%. At the same time, the team remain very busy in terms of taking formal action when necessary. And again, the report in 1.10 lists the formal action through notices that have been served in the report period. Happy to take any questions.
Councillor Timmis and then Councillor Alton.
Could I ask, in planning enforcement, which you're right, has improved, and I'd like to think I had a bit of a hand in that, is Kyle Dalton, is he on here temporarily, or is he going to continue as part of the leader of the team?
Yeah, so first of all, yes, thank you very much for your efforts in terms of in terms of Carl Dalton. He is a permanent member of staff.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, he leads our enforcement team. Then I did refer to a gentleman on paragraph 1.4, the specialist services manager leading the enforcement and conservation sections. That will effectively be Kyle's manager.
I see, it's very difficult when you say that, I don't know who it refers to.
Yeah, so we have a gentleman called Tobias starting a week Monday. So Kyle leads the enforcement team and Tobias will be the manager of the enforcement and conservation.
And conservation. So do you still have conservation, separate conservation officers or not?
Yes, we have, we now have 0.8 of a full-time equivalent conservation officer. So we have 2 part-time conservation officers.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Hobson.
Thank you. It might just be that I'm not reading this properly. So overall, great performance, as you know, I've said this many times, and you put the resources into it with the expertise and the management oversight, and you deliver results, which is fantastic. What does 1.9 mean? Because what does it mean to temporarily not fill a planning officer to allow the enforcement to continue? So obviously it's great that you're going to continue to focus on enforcement, but just what's the implications or impact of not filling that planning officer role? Is it just sensible use of resources because the priority is enforcement now and it's going well?
Yes, so we received the additional funding through reserves, and when that was exhausted, there was still some important work to do. We wanted to drive further down live enforcement numbers, etc. So yes, I took the decision. We had a vacancy at the planning officer at that time, yes, I felt that in terms of the overall service, that would be the better use of those resources. Planning application numbers are picking up again. So in terms of April, we would be looking to recruit into that post, into the substantive post as for a new planning officer.
I think that's helpful. That sets the context. That was just on resources. I have some other questions on other bits later in the report, but there's a question on resources.
If Councillor England wants to come in on that precise point, please do.
Not on that precise point. I just wanted to highlight something in the
Well,
report.
we'll park that and come back to it then. Councillor Hobson, you have more questions?
Just really moving on to the sounds, because I'm on the planning committee there, and we did turn down, we generally approved them, but we did turn down one the last time. And the bit that's sort of interested me is that you've put all, that we still don't have enough SANG. So you put a warning note on the website to say that currently I guess, so is that to do with the current plans, or does it have any relation to the new potential local plan that we've decided, or is it just to do with you're just putting it out there to be cautious so that to not to deal with expectations of planners, because that was relatively new to me, having sort of, I'm not an expert by any stretch, but I kind of know a little bit about the science and what we're doing with that. So,
thank you, Councillor. So that's very much a reflection on where we are right now in terms of the council strategic SANG. And in terms of right now, we have just the Bunkers Park and Chipfield Common, and just recognising that those SANG have finite capacity.
So that's just to do with the council SANGs rather than the other SANGs that we're looking at the DMC. I'm really pleased on that the Boxmoor Trust discussions are going well, because that must be, if to any sort of non-expert, that just looks like a slam dunk, like a absolutely classic thing. And I think I've mentioned it before, being a Boxmoor councillor. So that's really good. I just want to say really good to that. And I think that's the end of my highlighting on the report.
Just as a corollary to Philip's answer, as I oversaw the setting up of the mitigation strategy, when we kicked off this whole SANG thing, it was clear right at the start that we were never going to be able to have enough SANG for all developments, irrespective of whose development they were. Unfortunately, developers have taken the view largely that it's the council's problem and it's the council's responsibility to provide the SANG, and they're all demanding that the council provides the SANG, when frankly it's down to them to provide the SANG, not the council. So that's why we need to manage expectations and advise developers that they are not going to get the council's SANG. They need to provide it themselves.
That's the nature of it, because I hadn't had a chance to look at what the website actually says. So anyway, it was just a general and supportive comment, and just to really help put in context the work that we do outside of this committee as well. So thank you.
And there is also in the proposed new local plan up to Reg 19, there is the policy in terms of the SAC that reiterates the point that Councillor Anderson's making.
Councillor Timmis, on that very point.
On that very point, yes, I'm just going to say that you didn't mention that there are other SANGs that have been passed, basically, granted, which are private SANGs, if you like, but they basically are what developers are using. So you've got those two quite large SANGs in Berkhamsted, for instance.
So they are referred to in paragraph 1.16 in terms of the private SANGs that are going through the planning system.
Yeah, so what you were just saying earlier was that you only had a limited amount of SANG that were council owned.
Yes.
So, but we still, on the other hand, got other SANGs, some of which have come through and some of which are not being granted. And I do rather agree that maybe the development companies should be looking at the provision of SANGs.
Yeah, I tend to use the term third party. It's not official, but I tend to call it third party SANG. But that sort of, it's down to them to provide it. Councillor England, you wanted to make a point?
I want to join in the singing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, I don't want to do that. Look, I think in terms of sang, it's interesting, isn't it? Because as much as we want development to come forward, there also needs to be sang that comes forward with it, and there has to be a bit of kind of sort of robust saying, we will provide sang for our purposes, but if you need sang for your purposes, then you have to provide it. And that's a consistent message that goes out. What I wanted to just highlight on this report is the number of people attending adventure playgrounds. Because last year it was just under 4,000 and this year it's over 12,000. So I think some thanks need to go to whoever made that happen. Because if that could be recorded, I'm not exactly sure who it was, but that seems like a phenomenal achievement.
I can certainly pass that on to Diane Southern and she can then direct it to the team.
And similarly, I just wanted to refer, during the summer, Councillor Timmis and I had a very enjoyable drive around Watling Ward, and earlier in the year I was around Tring Western Rural with Brian, just with Councillor Patterson, just having a look at those areas. And as a bit of a townie, I have to say, my eyes were opened to parts of the borough that I hadn't seen too much, and the fly tipping issue, and indeed the planning enforcement issue that we talked about with barns appearing, which if they can stay in place for long enough, end up being change of use or stables or this, that, or the other. It was a real eye opener, and I'm glad that it happened. It was a really, I recommend it to all councillors who have anything to do with place to do that.
Before I bring in Councillor Patterson, just a quick question, sorry, on SANG again. I think to my mind, the oncoming soon, hopefully happen soon, appeal hearing in relation to what's called in relation to the Fairfax development or the development off Leighton Buzzard Road, because that was a case where the developer basically submitted the application without any saying whatsoever and said it was the council's job to find it. And I think that could be quite a crucial test with the planning inspectorate, and I know there's been some trouble scheduling that appeal. So could you just give us an update as to when that appeal is taking place?
Yeah, well, it's been delayed. The inspector, who was, well, it was the second inspector. That inspector has become ill, and therefore it's been postponed until, I believe, February. So there is still, yes. So it's not happening this year.
Okay, thank you. That really helps us to plan for the future. Councillor Patterson, sorry.
A couple of questions in the Sang area. Firstly, is there a sort of numbers game here as well? If the developer or the sales provider is saying of 250 hectares, then does that mean that there's X number of houses can be built in relation to that? Or is it less rigid than that?
No, there is, I don't know the exact calculation, but it is based on that type of calculation. The larger the hectareage, the more housing units could benefit from that SANG.
Yeah,
So
so
it's called credit.
the SANGs that we've already approved, there's enough of them to cope with the housing that's in stock as well before we go to the new local plan. Is that right?
Well, in terms of, there certainly is not sufficient council strategic SANG to deal with the proposed housing growth, which is why in the new local plan it's made clear, and in terms of the mitigation strategy, that the large developments are expected to find their own SANG solutions. It's the smaller sites, 9 units and below, where it would be impossible to provide a SANG solution, where we need to support them through the strategic council SANG.
And the other question I've got is specific to my ward, was mentioned briefly, that there's a development there at Willstone, which is a controversial one, factory homes, I think you know about it, Philip. And they are proposing that we allow them to have a SANG outside decorum altogether. I mean, I wasn't aware this was permissible, because obviously you've got no control over what that SANG would be used for. Well, it's in Buckinghamshire, so.
Yeah, so the SANGs are based on a catchment area. So depending on the size of the SANG, it will then potentially have a catchment area of 5 kilometres. So if the SANG is close to our decorum's boundaries, then it could encompass a patch of decorum. And we would just need to ensure that the appropriate legal agreements are in place to ensure that.
Okay.
Because if it's a development in decorum, then we can't issue planning permission unless we have the certainty that the impacts on the SAC will be mitigated. So
So we'd have to keep an eye on whether the SANG was going to be used for a lot of development in Buckinghamshire, and it wasn't too much, so there was enough spare for them to use it.
Yes, we need to be sure that there is credits available. But
the SANG credit system isn't dependent on the boundary of the authorities. It's determined by the zone of influence and the buffer that Philip just explained. So so Councillor Taylor.
I represent Berkhamsted Town Council on the Ashridge Estate Committee, the National Trust. We've been told on that committee that the National Trust is proposing some commercial SANGs on the edge of their protected areas, and to relocate their existing premises from the centre of the estate to the edge, and that this is dependent on selling the SANG credits to be able to pay for all the development, and that they're saying they need to get some sort of commercial loan to be able to do this. It sounds contrary to what I've just been hearing, that effectively developers are saying they can't find any commercially available SANGs or not able to do it if the National Trust are offering this service. Am I missing something here?
so again, it would depend on catchment areas. So in terms of developers not being able to find their own SANG, Councillor Anderson was referring to one specific scheme, the land west of Leighton Buzzard Road, where they are making the argument that the council should be providing SANG for them. I don't think that's generally the rule. Certainly so the Taylor Wimpey schemes that we've recently dealt with, they provide their own SANG solutions. But in terms of the National Trust SANG, again, when we look at the size of that SANG and what's eventually established, that will then determine the catchment area, and therefore it won't be able to serve, I would imagine, the entirety of Dacorum.
I was told it covered the full 12.5, was it mile or kilometres from the centre. They're also proposing developments on all sides of the current site to service the development in a number of different directions. Again, I'm repeating roughly what I was told. And what I'm curious about is why developers are saying they can't get credits for this if the National Trust are offering to sell what I would consider a prime site for a SANG, because it stops people going into the protected area of the Ashridge estate. And therefore, I was rather hoping we could find a way of accelerating that purchase of credits to get their development done quicker. It may not be appropriate, I don't know.
Yeah, so, so it does, I think you're describing, Councillor, the gateway proposal, which would be the significant SANG. This is still at very early stages. Officers are having discussions with the National Trust.
Right.
And we are working through their programme with them. Actually signed up a planning performance agreement to work through all these points with them. But we certainly note the point that where officers can accelerate it, we should do.
Maybe the developers would like to contribute to the acceleration.
And I would add, whilst that provides some of the SANG that's needed, it's still not going to be anywhere near the amount needed. There's still a shortfall, and it's still going to be a scarce resource, to use a classic economic phrase.
I would just like to see all their proposal sold rapidly.
Well, Councillor Timmis.
Thank you. Follow on from Councillor Taylor, and maybe I got this wrong, but I went along to National Trust had a display, a sort of week-long display of what their intentions were with Ashridge, and they were talking about these, you mentioned SANGs, but they called them hubs, because they wanted to divert people who were going up to Ashridge to these hubs to be able to allow the parts of Ashridge that have become overused and destroyed to be able to recover. So they were putting in place these, and they call them hubs, and they will not be like SANGs in as much as they will have cafes and this sort of thing and car parking, so that people went there rather than to the monument and to the areas of Ashridge that most people are going to at the moment. So I thought the intention was not so much to offset any housing or building or developments, but more to do with being able to draw people away for a period of time at least, away from the parts of Ashridge that are becoming overused. So that's what I understood from them when I went to these sort of displays. But I didn't think it was related to developments.
Though that is the purpose of SANGs. They are the suitable alternative natural green spaces to.
They didn't call them SANGs, they called them hubs. And unlike SANGs, which are supposedly open spaces and minimal sort of attractions in terms of coffee shops and this sort of thing, I think the intention was that they would have coffee shops in order to attract people, which is what is one of the part of the main attractions of Ashridge. If you go up there, is the fact there's a coffee shop up there and there's also Ashridge House, so a lot of people go there. So that was my interpretation of it, and maybe
I would argue that it's probably an issue of both, and the National Trust are taking advantage perhaps of the system to raise the funding they need to carry out some of the recovery work. Now they have that directly in the form of the SAM funding, But this would provide even additional funding on top of that as well.
Might be an interesting question to ask Natural England actually as to what they think.
Well, that rather neatly moves on to item 8A. Unless anyone's got any further questions, can we note the planning performance report? The committee happy with that?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Just moving item 8A, if I may, to do with Natural England. As I explained at the beginning of the meeting, they've apologised for tonight. They did ask if they could have a virtual meeting, and I'm inclined, with the committee's support, to dig one's heels in and say that we'd actually ask they attend face to face. But they have asked us to provide some questions ahead of that meeting, so that gives them some point of reference to come to the meeting in terms of what we want to cover. Could I ask, please, that members, by, say, the end of next week, submit any questions they might have for Natural England off the back of this whole SANG discussion we've had, because they are the, they are the cause, the overseer of the whole SANG issue. To submit those to Labour by the end of next week, so then those questions can be collated and sent on to them. Just to give you some idea of the questions that you might want to ask, just to kick things off. One of the questions I want to ask is off the back of last week's development management meeting, when the SANG at Nettleton Road, Water End, was refused permission. I was slightly puzzled as to why Natural England didn't object to the application, which was a bit puzzling, put the committee potentially in a bit of a more awkward spot than it would have been in. So one question might simply be along the lines of, could Natural England comment on why they haven't objected to SANG allocations that actually are counterproductive and don't actually they involve loss of attractive controlled landscapes rather than trying to help existing ones recover.
Can I just comment on that?
Please do.
Sort of conflict of interest here, because at the end of the day, the developers will go to Natural England first, I suspect, pre-qualify it, get all the nice sounding noises out of them and say, won't this be a good SANG? They'll have the discussion and they'll come back with a proposal which meets Natural England's requirements, and hey presto, we put a planning application in, which we don't like.
Yeah. Councillor Deacon.
What is it Natural England do apart from SANGs? I did Google because I came here ill to support you. Yeah, also, I thought we'd get a talk to explain who they are, what they do.
Perhaps do you want to try first, Phil?
I mean, I should ask that question.
I have got an answer.
Yeah. You know what?
I'm just trying to get you a better one first.
Yeah, I think perhaps you should ask them that question.
Hold on.
So on the gov.uk website, they have a list, access and rights of way, land management, landscape.
So Natural England is the government organisation, effectively, governing agency that is responsible for the protection and the safeguarding of the natural environment. That covers a number of range of interventions and things like, for example, like the rights of way, land management, landscape, parks, wildlife, biodiversity.
So if I ask a question about with the plans to build what we have to, assuming our local plan goes through in the next 20, 30 years, are they the body that will be protecting sort of public rights of way to make sure, and to because
I think you're almost asking three questions in one there. One, what does Natural England do?
Yeah.
Two, how do they feel about our emerging local plan? And three, how would they oversee the development of that existing emerging local plan? Sorry. And I think that's three very good questions there to start with. That's definitely very helpful. Has anyone else got Councillor Santamaria?
Just coming off of SANGs for a second, I think it would be interesting because the Environment Agency has sort of said they are potentially interested in developing the north part of the Gade River and Gadebridge Park, and obviously there's a lot of river above that as well. but they said it will probably take years to get the funding together. Is there any, could there be any input from Natural England on that?
Yeah.
Would they have any funding to help, even maybe with less? It's, obviously that's a huge project, but in the meantime, any other kind of conservation work that could be done on not just the River Gate, but obviously the other chalk streams and the and other waterways as well. So
Previously, sorry.
Just please send me these questions as well, so I can send them on to.
We have got the meeting recorded.
We have, yeah,
But
just so I can get the word in properly.
Previously, Natural England came to prominence nationally with respect to what are called the nutrient authorities. They were planning authorities around the Solent, where they established that there were problems with the quality of the soil, and that they needed to put a moratorium in to stop all house building around there to actually allow the soil to recover. So Chiltern Beechwoods is a very, very specific single case that they picked up on, whereas with the nutrients issue, we're talking about a dozen local authorities were affected by that, until the government, I think one of the last things the last government did was just write a line under that and said that nutrients weren't a problem anymore. But it's certainly, it would be very interesting to ask Natural England all these questions, and we'll get them all off to them in due course. Is everyone happy with that?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Item 9, the work programme. Paul Taylor puts it up on the screen. I'll just advise members that Councillor Deacon and I have had one meeting with officers to discuss the work programme already. I think for various reasons to do with this, that and the other, we're going to need more in the short term. This is not cast in stone. It is your work programme to determine what goes on it and what goes off it. It's an opportunity for members to ask officers to do a deeper dive into issues. And if you're able to see a screen where you're sat, you'll see where we are at the moment in terms of the various meetings. So the next meeting, we've got the joint budget, followed by, at the moment, the local walking and cycling infrastructure plan, LC-WIP for short, and the climate and ecological emergency. That's a small trifling subject, that won't take 5 minutes. 8th of January meeting. If it scrolls down. Right, Hearts Waste. We have a plan on where the Hearts Waste partnership is at the moment, and we also have the scrutiny review to consider. And then the February meeting, we've got the joint budget again, future neighbourhoods and the PSPO renewal. And in March at the moment, we've got performance reports, air quality, arts and culture strategy, and sports and leisure strategy. Just to let members know, Diane Southern, Assistant Director for the Place and Communities and Enterprises, is going to start producing performance reports for us as a separate item, because we felt that it deserved separate consideration. And then to be dated, we've still got quite a few planning items there. So the SIL review, e-bikes, affordable housing. Oh, and the one environmental one, we need to sort out a date for the visit to Cupid Green, which for those reasons didn't happen, but we do need to sort that at some point. And a whole load of a CSG annual review, which I'm quite keen on happening, because that used to happen in the old days. Every March we had an annual report from the Clean, Safe and Green to round up the year. And the same could be useful for a different time of year for the waste services team. And Diane advised that we all need to keep an eye on the Hemel Place strategy at some point. So we've got other bits and bobs there as well. But yes, Councillor Timmis, please.
Just seeing the other bits there, Luton Airport.
Yes.
That, as I think was reported some time ago, they were putting an application to the government for Secretary of State for a huge expansion from current 19 million passengers a year to 32 million, which is going to make a huge difference to the areas of Hertfordshire in particular, which are overflowing. And that originally went into the Secretary of State of the last administration, government, and is being kicked down the road a bit now. It was going to be report in July, then end of October, and now we're being told that the report from the Secretary of State will come in January. So that's going to make whatever the response, if the response is to object to it, then that's obvious. I mean, to allow it to go through is actually going to make a huge difference to a lot of people in the area.
Is there something the committee could contribute to the process?
Well, I know that James Doe isn't here, and we did have a member of staff, an officer who was very much up to speed and working with Herts County and other district councils like St Albans and so on, so that we had a joint approach onto, and everybody basically objecting to this huge increase. And so we're waiting really, and I don't think any office has been put in place after, I'm trying to think his first name, Mendham.
Steve Mendes.
Steve, yeah, he was very good. He's left, and I don't know that I haven't been told that there's anybody else.
Philip, could you ask James as to when he feels that the committee could add value by considering the matter?
I'm still attending all the Luton Airport meetings.
Yeah, we also need to schedule a meeting with James at some point anyway, but if we could just do that one outside of that, that'd be grand. Thank you. Any other specific matters that members would like to champion at this stage? Yes, Councillor Mitchell.
I've got something which I've been thinking about for some time around the commercial vehicles in residential areas. So I think I've mentioned it a couple of times at the committee. I know it's something that's been going on for a long time. It's not new, but it does cause a huge issue, and I'd really like to explore it more fully and look at what possible options there could be for resolving the issue. I know it's not an easy, going to be any easy answers or solutions.
Is this in relation to parking?
Yeah, because in Cambridge, for example, you know, it's not an issue if there's one commercial vehicle per household. We know that the depots are all closing down and people are having to take their work vehicles home, and that's understandable in that instance. But I have several cases where we've got businesses operating out of a property and they've got maybe 5 or 3 vehicles, and then it's not okay because we've already got a massive issue with parking. Say we've got lorries as well that are storing goods parked on the side of the road.
Just a second, Councillor Deakin. Philip.
Yeah, so when you're, it's very interesting discussion, and when you're describing vehicles in driveways, commercial vehicles in driveways and use of properties for commercial purposes, then what we are looking at here is a potential material change of use requiring planning permission.
They're not always in driveways, unfortunately.
No, which is, yeah, which is, so certainly one thing, the point I was going to make, in our local enforcement plan, we do have an annual pull-out section, which changes each year. And if there is a particular topic area that members would like us to focus on in 2025, so for example, commercial use of properties and driveways, we can't control commercial vehicles on the highway from a planning perspective. But if that is a topic that you'd like us to work on proactively in 2025, then that could be considered.
Some residents might be interested in that, but the main issue are the vehicles that are parked on the highways, unfortunately.
Councillor Deakin.
Yeah, and I just add, very good point. It's also safety. There are, you know, I saw in North End Farm, a guy used to take a bus home and park there. So it's imagine, you know, so for visibility, but I just assumed there was nothing we could do, so I kind of like kept it in.
Picking up on the safety point, I've had a report this week of a near head-on collision due to the parking of a commercial vehicle.
Is this something that we could have a combined report on that picks up all the issues on it?
We can certainly look at that. I mean, there are a lot of different elements of it, including highways and other elements of it, which obviously leave us with very little powers. But yeah,
if we could look at, if we could ensure that we're doing what we can do, then it gives us an opportunity to explore those. Sorry, Councillor Paul.
Yeah, I was only going to add, we had the same problem in Bovington, and I am in discussion with Rick Roberts County about it, because we have, where Bovington Prison is, on Molyneux Avenue, we have a number of HGVs, we're talking about 40-foot trailers, that come up in the evening, park, get picked up by somebody else, go home, and then come back in the morning and drive off at 5 or 6, wherever it is. And we've got them staying overnight in their cabs. There's no toilet facilities locally. So I am in discussion with Richard Roberts about it, but as you quite rightly say, on the highway, it's an extremely difficult thing to deal with.
I don't think we'll be able to cover every single incident in the whole borough, but what I'd be most grateful to officers on behalf of the committee is if we could have some sort of combined report at some point to cover all these issues, and as a sort of quid pro quo, leave it to yourselves to say to us when you can produce that, rather than trying to prescribe when now. Would members be happy with that? And would officers be happy with that? You'd be able to do that for us? Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Councillor Bromham, sorry.
Very, very briefly. So a lot of what you mentioned is on highways, but there's a lot of decorum land, and so I have been investigating with officers how we could possibly control the parking in the decorum-owned areas as well.
Yeah, okay. Any other items for tonight? Well, we'll make sure that the work programme, yes, it sometimes suffers from being last at the end of the meeting when people want to go home, but we'll keep it at the end of each meeting, and that is the opportunity members have to be able to query what's happening with items and to ask for items to be added or removed or changed, or etc. And the important thing is when we ask officers to do reports for us, that we actually give them a steer as to what the kind of issues we're seeking to be covered, because they can't guess what it is we're after. It helps them indeed to produce the report. And unless anybody's got anything else, I will close the meeting. Thank you very much.